Today we are looking at the anatomy of anger, a series that I've been looking at from the Sermon on the Mount, and today's passage is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 to 26. The scripture reading has been just read for us, and I'm going to read it again. It says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shalt not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. And again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to the court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." So here in this passage, Jesus is addressing the problem of anger. And very clearly, once again, Jesus is making a distinction between what people have heard and what he's telling them. He says in the 21st verse, "You have heard." And then in the 22nd verse, "But I tell you." So there is actually a contrast, or we should say a contradistinction between what people say and what God is telling us. So in the language over here, it looks as if that anger is a critical issue which Jesus is addressing. So therefore, in this passage, if you look very carefully, murder as an action is being redefined in motives. Murder as an action is redefined as anger in our emotions. Now, when we examine anger, anger is of three types. We have anger, which is an anger of duration. That means once some people get angry, they'll be angry for a very long time, and it takes a very long duration for them to cool down and come back to normal. Then there is an anger of frequency. That means some people get angry for any and every reason. For small reasons, they'll get very easily upset and angry. So that's the anger of frequency. And then there is the anger of intensity. That means when they get angry, it's like a volcano that is exploding, or probably like a nuclear bomb exploding badly. So there are three types of anger: anger of duration, the period in which they are angry for a long time; anger of frequency, how quickly they get angry; and anger of intensity. I don't know what kind of anger you have, whether it's an anger of duration or an anger of frequency or an anger of intensity, or it's an anger which is a combination of two of these elements, or if it's all these three types of anger that you're possessing. But the point that we need to understand over here is, why do you get angry? Jesus is talking about anger. Now, anger is just a human emotion like crying, like sadness, like sorrow, like laughter. So as a human emotion, we can't call it as wrong because it's a part of human emotion. So the question that we really need to ask, and that what Jesus is actually trying to address, is, why do you get angry? Now, if you're angry because of your ego, then it's a wrong kind of anger. Maybe you might say that I have never thought of murdering someone. True. But have you ever felt that you were so angry you wished you could murder that guy? Sometimes I've heard Christians saying, I wish I were not a Christian. Otherwise, I would have finished that chap. So there are times when people get so angry, they wish they can murder. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about. But the point that I told you earlier, anger is a human emotion. And in fact, Jesus also got angry. when he took the whip and went into the temple to beat the money changers, because they had made the place of worship into a place of economic theft, grabbing from the people, selling things at exorbitant prices. And that was happening inside the temple, in the outer courtyard. And that was supposed to be the place of witness. But Jesus gets so angry that he drives off all those people from there who are making money. And then Jesus tells them, you have made the house of God into a den of robbers. So the question is not about not getting angry, but about why you're angry and how you're expressing that anger. In fact, in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 26, it says, in your anger, do not sin. So it's possible to be angry without sinning. But here Jesus is addressing a kind of anger that actually it erupts within, enrages you, engulfs you, and then explodes on the others. So when we look at the text, this is what we can see. But I tell you that if anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Most of the time, our anger is distorted. It grows out of our self-centeredness or the greed to micromanage other people, and if they don't toe in line, to crush them with verbal abuse, or at other times out of frustration, we displace the emotions that we are going through on those who are nearest to us, or sometimes maybe even out of sheer jealousy, like Saul's anger against David, where you erupt in anger because you're jealous of that person. The best example of distorted anger in the Bible is Jonah, that prophet. He was upset when God told him to go to the Ninevites. Then he was upset when they repented. Then he was upset when the shade-giving wine dried up. So like Jonah, most of the times our anger is sometimes out of proportion to the offense. And sometimes it is directed correctly, sometimes it is directed wrongly. Therefore, there are two issues that arise when we deal with the subject of anger. Number one, how do we express anger? And number two, to whom do we direct our anger? Now, both of these issues are addressed by Jesus Christ in the small passage. So when we look at the text, the first thing that Jesus is talking about is the way in which we express, the nature of expression. Now notice very carefully over here, again, anyone who says to his brother or sister, Raka. Now Raka is an Aramaic word for contempt, which would bring a person before the Sanhedrin on defamation charges. So what would happen if you call somebody Raka? It's a word of contempt. You would have to go and, face the Sanhedrin. You would be answerable to court. Of course, the word court in English is translated as court, but in the Greek, the word is Sanhedrin. So they would have to go to the Sanhedrin, where the elders would decide what kind of punishment to mete out to the person who treated another person with contempt. That means you can't treat another person with contempt. Now, what Jesus is saying in this passage is, if you say Raka, you have to go and answer the Sanhedrin. But if you say fool, you will be in danger of the fire of hell. The word for fool in the Greek is more. Now, more actually means, somebody who's idiotic, somebody who's dumb. In fact, from this word more, we get the English word moron. Okay. Sometimes we say, what a moron this guy is, Now, if we tell anyone moron, you will be in danger of the fire of hell. That means it's a wrong expression. It's a wrong way to, blurt out your anger, because it carries with it the damnation of hell. And the answer is very, very simple, because you're calling another human being who is created in the image of God. Okay, we are all created in the image of God. Now you're looking at another human being and you're calling that human being a moron. You're actually making a caricature of God himself in the process. And that's why in this passage we see, if you say fool, you're in the danger or the fire of hell. That means this kind of anger carries along with it the damnation of hell. So we have to be very careful about how we express our anger, whether we use raka or whether we call somebody a moron. We must be very careful about how we express anger. We can be angry. And sometimes it is important to point out and tell to the person why you are angry and what you have done is wrong. That's right. But you can't call a person as a moron. And that's where it is wrong. You are in damnation of hell if you do that. So that it's talking about the nature of the way in which we express that anger. Now, when we truly try to understand the application of this particular command, what does it mean? It means that it takes us to entirely another level of spirituality. That means the way we unleash our malicious anger and the insults that we throw others, we should be careful. That means every action through which we hurt others, we must be thoughtful. That means it talks about the failure to forgive that runs deep within all of us. We can't forgive. And because we can't forgive, we do all kinds of things. Either we call a person a moron, or we simply absent ourselves from the presence of that person. We ignore that person. Many ways in which we actually hurt people because we are not able to forgive. The back talk and the politics that we engage in to destroy another person's reputation. One person is angry, oh, they did something so bad. How could they do it? And therefore you back talk and do all kinds of politics and harm that person, humiliate that person, belittle that person, all that. Now, anybody who does this kind of a thing, they are in the danger of the damnation of hell. The violence with which we treat others when they let us down. We live in a world which is broken and people will let us down. And many times I've been let down. And sometimes I ask the question whether my anger to those people because I've been let down is equal to the harm that they have done. It is not. My anger seems sometimes disproportionate. And therefore, we can't exhibit or express this kind of violence either in words or language or in distance. And as a result, what happens? There is a refusal to communicate because they are substandard people. What has happened? Mentally, we have relegated such people to the level of substandardness. And then we treat them at that level of substandardness. Now, that is where this kind of anger is wrong. And if we engage in this kind of expression of anger, then we are facing the damnation of hell. So how you express anger is very, very important. Therefore, in this small section, we are seeing about the challenge that we need to have to examine ourselves deep within. The second aspect of this anger, first is the way in which we express, and second is the object on which we express, on the people on whom we express. And that also Jesus is covering in this passage. So when we look at this object of expression, in the 23rd verse, it says brother or sister. In the 25th verse, it says, settle your matters quickly with your adversary. Some translation, it will say enemy. So there are two objects over here of our anger. Either it's a brother or sister, or it's an enemy. And Jesus Christ is telling us how to address anger at both these levels. Whether it's an anger at the enemy or whether it's an anger with a brother or sister. Now look at this. In the 23rd verse, it says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you. Now, if you're offering a gift at the altar, you know, what is it talking about over here? It's talking about the hidden reality of evil that is residing inside our own hearts. How can we offer any gift to God when our hearts are defiled with poisonous anger? It's not just that the Pharisees and the Sadducees who were venomous in their anger and they plotted to kill Jesus Christ. But in the Old Testament, we read about Cain, who murdered his brother Abel only because his offering was accepted and Cain's was not. How many Christian leaders pass resolutions to harm in order to placate their anger? How much of toxic language is used to undermine a brother or sister in ministry? So what is the object of your expression? How do you handle that? Now, we all live in a difficult world and we have faced anger from other people. We have been the objects of such kind of venom. Have we also made others the objects of such kind of venom? That is where we need to be careful. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us we should not be angry. It says, be angry, but do not sin. And the thing is, if you are angry for the right reasons, it's good. I remember once I was traveling in a bus and I was traveling from Vellore to Chennai. I was sitting in the second last row of the bus. The bus was not very populated and there were not many people, but I was sitting in the second last row and behind me, the conductor was sitting. In the first row, just behind the driver, there was one drunkard. Okay. And this drunkard was singing songs and all kinds of funny things he was doing because he was drunk. Then what had happened was, behind the drunkard, the bench behind the seat behind the drunkard, those seats were empty. But behind that seat, there were three young people sitting there, three guys. And all of them were hefty and tall, and they were young. Now they were making fun with this drunkard. Suddenly they'll tap him from one side. When he turns back and they'll look in another direction. Then they'll tap him from another side and he look in that direction. They were having fun. And I thought this was not right. Why do you make fun of another person? And it is not right. And I was getting upset about it because what they were doing with that drunkard is not right. Now the drunkard was not bothering anybody. He was sitting alone in that bench and he was just singing to himself and doing some crazy things in his bench, but he was not bothering anybody. Then this drunkard started smoking. Now when he was smoking, some of the ash from that cigarette, it came off and it fell on the young people behind them. And they got very upset. And one guy, one tall guy and very little bit on the fatter side, he got up, there's a bench, there's a seat in between, there's a gap. But his hands were long enough. And at that point, the drunkard just turned because these people were shouting at him. When he turned, this fellow hit him and he hit him straight on his face, on the nose. And the nose started bleeding. Okay. And I got angry. Now, I am not a very tall person. You all know I'm a little bit on the shorter end. I got so upset. I went and everybody in the bus was angry with that drunkard. But I was angry against these young people. And I went to the drunkard and I saw the place where he was sitting, that entire seat was full of blood because his nose was pouring blood. And then these boys, young boys, put him in the police station, throw him off the bus. They were saying, I got so upset. I just looked at those boys, young boys, taller than me. All the three, if they joined me, they could have finished me. I just pointed my finger at them and I said, if you touch that man anymore, I'll finish you. And don't tell me that you're going to take him to a police station. Because if you take him to a police station, I will put you into jail because you hit him without warning and his nose is bleeding over there. How dare you? Those three boys became quiet. The entire bus became quiet. And I quietly came back to my seat. The conductor asked me what happened. I said, nothing happened. And I went and sat down quietly. For what are you angry? We can be angry when there are injustices in our world. But it is wrong to be angry just for the sake of your ego, because your ego is offended. People get angry most of the time, disproportionately, because their ego is offended. Now, how do you treat the objects of your anger? That is where we need discipline in our lives. And it is time for us to take this passage a little deeply, examine our own consciences, and see where we can learn to change. I don't know what type of anger you have, whether your anger is a type of duration, whether the anger is the type of frequency, whether your anger is a type of intensity, but whatever kind of anger it is, the manner in which we express, we need to see. And the person on whom we are expressing that anger, that also we have to be careful about. If we are expressing the anger in the right direction to the right person, let it be done in such a way so that what you are doing is not disproportionate to the offense. But it is needed to help. I remember one day I was visiting one of my church members, and this 3-year-old boy, Arjun, the toddler, little toddler, was doing something on the floor, and his father normally never corrects him. If the mother tells Arjun, don't do that, immediately he'll stop doing, because he knows when mommy tells, she will punish. When the father tells, he never listens. So father was telling him repeatedly, don't do it, don't do it. And the little boy was not paying attention. All of a sudden, the father got up and he went and smacked that boy on the back. 3-year-old toddler, in such a hard way. Now, what was that anger? That anger was not the anger of punishment. That anger was the anger of frustration. Don't punish because of frustration. Don't punish your children because of frustration. Punish your children because of education. If the punishment becomes so much that the child cannot bear, then it's not education, it becomes into torture. So therefore, think very carefully, how do you want to express your anger on the object that deserves it? Now, whoever it is, whether it is a brother or a sister, a child or a parent, or a wife or a spouse, on whoever you're going to express that anger, if it is in the correct direction, let it not be disproportionate. If it is not in the correct direction, be very careful. Sometimes what happens is we are angry with one person, but we can't show it. So what happens? The father, the boss comes and shouts at his employee badly in front of all the employees, humiliates him. Now this employee goes home because he's upset with his boss. When he goes home, what happens? His wife gives him a cup of tea, the same cup of tea that she gives every time. What kind of cup of tea you have given me? It's not even hot. And he shouts at his wife. What is he doing? His anger against the boss is being displaced on his wife. Because he doesn't know where to put that anger, he gives it on the wrong person. Wife doesn't know what to do. She goes into the kitchen and she's trying to do something over there. That time, the 3-year-old toddler comes, "Mummy, I want to have something to drink, mummy, mummy," catching hold of her sari and pulling. Mummy gets angry and gives the fellow one slap. Poor fellow does not know what to do, why mummy slapped him. He gets angry, he goes and kicks the dog. Now, what am I trying to tell over here? Let's not displace our anger in the wrong direction. If we displace it in the right direction, let it not be disproportionate. So these are the various lessons that we are learning about anger from this passage. The conclusion in the 26th verse is very, very scary. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. The language over here is accounting language. And the language, if you see over here, this is the kind of language bankers will understand, Marwadis will understand, business people will understand. You will not get out until you have paid the last penny. That means the transaction has to be fully completed. Then only you can go. What a terrible thing. Already Jesus told, if you express your anger wrongly or in the wrong direction, you will be facing the damnation of hell. And you will not escape that damnation until you have paid the last penny. Therefore, my dear friends, just think what kind of discipleship God is calling us to. It is very important. I think anger is an issue that almost every one of us deals with. And in that area, we need to exercise some degree of discipline. So let us take this time to examine ourselves and pray. And maybe if the Lord is leading you, and if you feel that you need to change in some areas of your life, then maybe this is the time for us to bow down our heads in prayer. Let us pray. Almighty and merciful and loving God, grant me the needed measure of your Spirit to teach me to step back so that my anger is not disproportionate to the offense, to swallow my pride so that I'm not angry for wrong reasons, to learn wisdom so that I don't place unrealistic expectation on others. And every time my own patience fails, O Lord, release some of your peace to me so that I will not sin when I am angry. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.